The crystal chandelier trembled with the echo of his laughter. Every head in the restaurant turned toward the corner booth where Ethan Caldwell, the billionaire tech mogul whose name could buy cities, leaned back in his seat, shoulders shaking with amusement. His perfectly tailored suit shimmered faintly beneath the amber light, his silver watch flashing like a blade each time he gestured. Across from him stood a young waitress, pale, trembling slightly, her notepad clutched to her chest like a fragile shield. Her name tag read, Lila. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She looked as though she'd just been hit, not by a hand, but by the kind of cruelty that hides behind a smile. "I'm sorry, sir," she managed softly. "I didn't mean to spill your drink." Ethan waved a dismissive hand. "You didn't mean to? Then I guess it just leapt off the tray itself, right?" His friends chuckled, that empty, sycophantic laughter of people who orbit wealth like moths around a flame. A hush followed. Lila swallowed hard, eyes glistening as she dabbed at the dark stain spreading across his lapel with a napkin. He flinched, pushing her hand away with a sharp movement. "Hi, my beautiful family. Thank you for sticking around with me through our trying times. I really appreciate your love and support. We're finally back again to give you many more beautiful stories. If you're already hooked in for today's story and ready to enjoy it, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. Just stop. You've done enough." For a moment, no one breathed. Then, as she stepped back, the corner of his mouth lifted again, and the laughter returned. Cruel, mocking, unforgiving. And yet, behind that laughter, in the reflection of the mirror behind the booth, her eyes met his. Not angry, not humiliated, but sad. A kind of sadness that carried the weight of something much larger than a spilled drink. Something final. Outside, the rain had begun to fall against the restaurant's wide glass windows. Thunder rolled faintly in the distance, a low hum that seemed to swallow the silence that followed her exit. Ethan's laughter faded. "Come on, man," one of his friends said uneasily. "She's just a waitress." Ethan smirked. Then she should learn to be a better one. But even as he said it, the taste of the moment soured in his mouth. There was something about the way she'd looked at him, something that didn't fit the story he was used to telling himself. He brushed it off. People looked at him that way all the time. Envy, resentment, judgment. Pick your poison. Still, when he reached for his drink, his hand hesitated. Lila stood in the alley behind the restaurant, rain mixing with tears she refused to let fall. She'd seen men like him before, all power, no kindness. But for some reason, this one hurt more. Maybe it was the laughter. Or maybe it was the reminder that time was slipping through her fingers faster than she could catch it. She pulled out her phone and glanced at the date glowing on the cracked screen. 3 months. 3 months left. 90 days of borrowed time. And here she was, humiliated over a spilled drink when her body was quietly waging a war it could no longer win. She leaned against the wall, whispering to herself, "Don't cry, Lila. Not for him. Not for anyone." Her best friend's words echoed in her mind. "Promise me you'll live every day like it's your last, Lee. No regrets. No fear." But right now, living felt like the hardest thing in the world. Across town, Ethan's penthouse overlooked the city like a throne above the clouds. He poured himself a drink, but the ice clinked too loud in the glass. He turned on the TV to drown it out, the voice of a news anchor cutting through the quiet. And in other news, Caldwell Industries continues to face backlash for alleged layoffs and worker mistreatment. He muted it. He didn't need to hear his own name twisted into something ugly again. But the reflection in the glass window didn't lie. He looked tired. Not the kind of tired money could fix. The kind that came from running too long, too far from himself. He caught his reflection again, the brief flash of her eyes in his mind. Sad. Honest. Unbroken. Something about them lingered. The next evening, when he returned to the same restaurant for a business meeting, he saw her again. Lila. The waitress. She was moving slower today, paler, but still smiling as she took orders and carried trays. There was a faint tremor in her hands, but her politeness never wavered. When their eyes met again, Ethan expected anger. But instead, she gave him a small, almost forgiving smile, the kind that doesn't need words. Something twisted in his chest. He cleared his throat and muttered to the manager, "That waitress. Lila, right? I may have been a bit harsh yesterday." The manager nodded, surprised. "She didn't complain, sir. Said you were just having a bad day." That sentence hit him harder than he expected. Didn't complain. Didn't curse his name. Didn't post it online for sympathy or attention. She just moved on. And that made him wonder, why? That night, he couldn't sleep. He opened his laptop, meaning to distract himself with emails, but instead, he searched her name, Lila Hart. The results were sparse. A small fundraiser page came up near the top. Help Lila Hart fight stage 4 sarcoma. 3 months left to raise $50,000. He froze. The picture was unmistakable, her smile, faint but genuine, surrounded by family and friends. Underneath, a message written by someone named Maya, best friend, read, "Lila doesn't know I'm posting this. She's too proud to ask for help. But she's the kindest soul I've ever met, and time is running out." The laughter from the night before came rushing back, but this time it didn't echo. It haunted. Ethan stared at the screen until dawn painted the sky gray. For the first time in years, his chest ached with something real, shame, guilt, and something he hadn't felt since before his empire, empathy. He leaned back, whispering to himself, she didn't deserve that. But maybe he could still make it right. Have you ever judged someone too quickly, only to discover a truth that shattered your assumptions? Share your thoughts in the comments, because sometimes one act of understanding can change an entire life. The city woke beneath a pale sunrise, glass towers catching the first shimmer of light. For most people, it was another Monday, another beginning. For Lila Hart, it was one more borrowed day. She moved quietly through her small apartment, a second-hand kettle whistling faintly as she poured water into a chipped mug. On the fridge, a calendar hung, every date marked with red ink. Chemo appointments, hospital visits, shifts, and at the bottom of the month, scrawled in looping handwriting, "Don't waste a sunrise." Her doctor had told her 3 months ago, stage 4 sarcoma, terminal. The words had landed like stones in her chest, but after the first week of crying, she decided she wouldn't let those stones crush her. She would stack them into something beautiful, even if she didn't have long to build. At Caldwell Industries, the view from the top floor stretched endlessly, a kingdom of light and noise that belonged to Ethan Caldwell, the man who built it from code and chaos. But this morning, the empire felt different. The laughter from his boardroom didn't sound the same. The numbers on the screens didn't spark pride anymore. He'd spent the night staring at Lila's fundraiser page, hovering over the donate button without clicking. He could have covered the entire goal 1,000 times over. But something stopped him. Money couldn't erase the way he'd made her feel. If he helped her, he wanted to do it the right way, not as a savior, but as a man trying to make amends. That evening, Lila clocked in for her shift, humming softly to the tune of a song from a life that felt 1,000 years away. The restaurant was full again, clinking glasses, perfume, laughter. And at the corner booth, fate waited in a dark suit. Ethan. She froze for a moment before forcing herself to breathe. He's just a customer, she told herself. Just another customer. When she approached, his expression wasn't cruel or mocking this time. It was hesitant, almost human. "Good evening, Mr. Caldwell," she said evenly, pen ready. He looked up, eyes softer than she remembered. "Please, it's Ethan. And, I owe you an apology." Her brows lifted. The other waiters pretended not to listen. For what? For being an arrogant fool. He gave a small, awkward smile, the kind that didn't know how to exist on his face. "I shouldn't have laughed at you. I was having a bad day, but that's no excuse." Lila studied him for a moment. There was something real in his tone, something that didn't sound rehearsed. "It's all right," she said quietly. "We all have bad days." And then, with a faint smile, "Some of us just have fewer left than others." Ethan blinked. The words hung between them, confusing him, unsettling him. "What do you mean?" he asked, but she only smiled politely and took his order. Later that night, after she'd gone home, he finally clicked, "Donate." The amount, $50,000. Anonymous. He didn't expect thanks. He didn't want credit. He just wanted to know that maybe, somehow, she could have a chance, or at least some comfort. The next morning, Lila awoke to a flood of messages on her phone. Her fundraiser had hit its goal overnight. "Oh my God," she whispered, covering her mouth. "Maya, look." Her best friend, still in pajamas, rushed to her side. "Who donated?" "Who? Wait, Anonymous." Maya frowned. "Lee, this is huge. You can start the new treatment trial." Lila's eyes filled with tears. "Whoever it was, I wish I could thank them." She didn't know that across town, Ethan sat in his office, reading the same page, his heart unexpectedly light for the first time in years. Days turned to weeks. Lila began her treatment. The pain was sharp, the fatigue worse, but hope had a strange way of numbing the ache. She spent her mornings painting small postcards, sunsets, rain-soaked streets, faces half-remembered. She sold them online, not for money, but for meaning. And Ethan, he started showing up more often. Not at her restaurant, but at the hospital's donation drives, at volunteer events, quietly funding programs without ever taking credit. One day, he saw her there, in a bright scarf, helping distribute food to other patients. She looked fragile, but her eyes were alive. "You shouldn't be on your feet," he told her gently. She laughed. "If I'm going to go, I'd rather go standing." He couldn't help but smile. "You're impossible." "So I've been told." They began to talk. Sometimes after her shifts, sometimes during her lunch breaks. She told him about her mother, who died when she was 10, about her dream of traveling to Italy to see the Sistine Chapel before she couldn't anymore. He told her about the company, the loneliness of success, and how he'd once wanted to build something meaningful, before greed swallowed the dream. They found solace in each other's truths, two people from worlds apart, meeting in the quiet space between guilt and grace. One evening, as the sun bled gold across the skyline, Lila asked softly, "Do you believe people can really change?" Ethan hesitated. "I didn't used to. But lately, I think maybe we can remember who we were before we lost ourselves." She smiled faintly. "Then I hope you never forget again." Her words struck deeper than she could have known. That night, Ethan made a decision. He would use his power for something better. He would restructure his company, start funding patient programs, and clean up the empire he'd built on ambition. He didn't tell her. He just began. But fate isn't kind to those who think they've outsmarted time. Because a week later, Lila collapsed during her shift. If you had only 3 months left, what would you fight to do? Tell me in the comments. Your answer might inspire someone who needs hope today. The sound of shattering glass echoed through the restaurant. Lila's tray hit the ground first, followed by her knees. The plate spun in slow motion before breaking apart across the marble floor. The room froze. Conversations, laughter, even the music halted. Her manager shouted her name. 2 waiters rushed to her side, but she wasn't moving. Her eyes fluttered open, then rolled back, her skin pale as porcelain. Someone called for an ambulance. In the chaos, a familiar voice cut through, sharp, desperate, terrified. "Move. Let me through." It was Ethan. He dropped beside her, his designer jacket falling to the floor as he cradled her head in his arms. "Lila, hey, stay with me." Her lips trembled. "Ethan, I'm here. You're okay. Just breathe, all right." She tried to smile, but her voice was barely a whisper. "I guess I should have taken a break, huh?" "Don't joke right now," he said, his throat tightening. He pressed his hand against hers, her fingers cold and limp. "You're going to be fine." Sirens wailed outside. He stayed with her until the paramedics lifted her onto the stretcher. When the doors closed, he climbed into the ambulance without a word. At the hospital, sterile lights hummed overhead. Doctors moved quickly, words flying past him, BP dropping, code blue, tumor spread. Ethan could barely process it. His mind kept replaying her faint smile, her shaking hands, the way she'd said, "Some of us just have fewer left than others." When the doctor finally approached him, Ethan stood. "How is she?" The doctor sighed. "She's stable, for now. But the cancer's advanced. Her body's weak, very weak. I'm afraid the new treatment isn't working. Ethan swallowed hard. There has to be something else. Another trial, another. Mr. Caldwell, the doctor interrupted gently, sometimes the best thing we can give them is comfort. She needs peace, not more pain. The words hit him like a hammer. Peace. He'd spent his entire life chasing power, money, control, and now he was powerless when it actually mattered. Hours later, he sat by her hospital bed. The machines beeped steadily, each sound a reminder that time was running out. Her eyes opened slowly. "You didn't have to come," she whispered. "I did." He managed a faint smile. "You scared me, you know." "Sorry about that," she murmured, her voice raspy. "Guess I'm not great at staying upright." He chuckled softly. "You know, most people would have taken a few days off work." "Most people aren't paying rent," she said, and despite her weakness, there was that spark again, humor, courage, defiance. The things he admired most about her. She looked up at him. "Were you the one who donated?" He froze. "I won't be mad if you say yes," she added softly. He hesitated, then nodded once. "Yeah, it was me." Her eyes filled with tears. "Why?" "Because I was wrong," he said simply. "About you. About everything." She squeezed his hand weakly. "Thank you for seeing me." Those words pierced him deeper than any insult ever could. He realized then, she didn't want pity or grand gestures. She wanted to be seen. Truly seen. Over the next few weeks, Ethan became a fixture at the hospital. He brought her favorite soup, stayed late to read aloud from her favorite books, and made the nurses laugh with ridiculous stories about his disastrous cooking attempts. He even brought her paintings from local artists, so she'd have something bright to look at from her bed. But there were nights, quiet, heavy nights, when he sat alone in the hospital chapel, staring at the cross on the wall, wondering when he'd last prayed for anything that wasn't selfish. One evening, he arrived to find her sketching something in her notebook. "What are you working on?" he asked, setting a coffee on her tray. She smiled faintly. "You." He raised an eyebrow. "Me?" "Yeah," she said. "I wanted to draw the look on your face when you're not pretending." He laughed softly. "And what does that look like?" "Sad," she said simply. "But kind." He swallowed hard. "You're a terrible liar." She shook her head. "No. I think you've been sad for a long time. Maybe longer than you know." That night, her words followed him home. They dug deep into places he'd buried, memories of his father, who had died when Ethan was young, leaving behind a business empire and a warning, "Never show weakness, son. The world eats kind men alive." So he hadn't. He'd built walls of wealth so high no one could climb them. Until now, until she had found a way in. The next morning, he met with his board of directors and made a decision that stunned them all. "We're starting a new foundation," he said firmly. "One that funds research for rare cancers. I'm matching every employee donation." His CFO frowned. "That's going to cost millions, Ethan." "I know." He leaned forward. "But what good is all this money if it can't save a single life?" They didn't argue again. Back at the hospital, Lila was fading. Her body weaker, her breaths shallower. Yet her spirit remained fierce. When Ethan walked in, she smiled faintly. "You look tired." "I'm not leaving you," he said. She studied him for a moment, then whispered, "Promise me something." "Anything. When I'm gone, don't stop caring. Don't go back to that man who laughs to forget he's lonely." He tried to smile, but the tears betrayed him. "You're not going anywhere." "Promise me," she repeated. He took her hand and kissed it. "I promise." That night, as rain tapped softly against the hospital window, Ethan stayed beside her, holding her hand until she drifted to sleep. He didn't know it yet, but that promise, those 4 words, would become the turning point of his entire life. Have you ever met someone who changed the way you see the world, even if only for a moment? Share your story in the comments. You never know who might need to hear it today. Hospitals had their own kind of silence, the kind that hummed between beeping monitors and whispered prayers. Ethan had grown used to it. For weeks, it was the soundtrack of his life. He'd traded boardrooms for hospital corridors, high-stakes deals for long nights sitting in a chair beside Lila's bed. But something inside him had shifted, quietly, profoundly. The man who once measured success in dollars was now measuring time by heartbeats. And lately, he'd begun to notice something strange. Every evening when he visited, there were flowers on Lila's bedside table. Fresh, always white lilies. At first, he thought they were from the hospital staff. Then he assumed it was her best friend, Maya. But one night, when he arrived earlier than usual, he caught sight of a woman slipping out of Lila's room. Middle-aged, dark coat, face hidden beneath a hood. Ethan frowned. "Excuse me, who are you?" The woman froze, then turned slightly. "Just an old friend," she murmured before hurrying away. He stepped into the room. The faint scent of lilies lingered, and Lila looked up with a small, knowing smile. "You saw her, didn't you?" Ethan sat down. "Who was that?" She hesitated, eyes distant. "Someone I used to know. Someone I lost a long time ago." He tilted his head. "Family? Not exactly." She looked out the window. "Let's just say, she's part of the reason I am where I am today." There was pain in her voice, but something else too. Forgiveness, maybe. Or the attempt at it. "Will you tell me?" he asked softly. "Not yet," she said. "Some truths you have to earn." Later that night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about that woman. The way she'd avoided his gaze, the way Lila's expression had changed. It wasn't fear, it was something heavier. Regret. He opened his laptop and began searching for names, hospital visitor logs, anything that might tell him more about Lila's past. He found nothing. But one old record from a community newspaper caught his eye. Local teenager, Lila Hart, survives tragic accident. Mother missing. The photo showed a younger Lila, bandaged, staring at the camera with hollow eyes. Ethan's breath caught. So that was it. The woman, her mother. Alive, but hiding. Why? The next morning, when he visited Lila, she was painting again. The light streaming through the blinds gave her face a faint glow. He hesitated before speaking. "Lila, about your mother." Her brush froze. "You found out." "I didn't mean to pry." She sighed, setting the brush down. "It's okay. It was bound to come out sooner or later." He waited. "She left when I was 16, she said quietly. "After the accident. I was in the hospital for months, and when I got out, she was gone. I used to think she died. Part of me hoped she did, because that would have hurt less than knowing she chose to leave." Ethan's chest tightened. "And now she's back. She's been visiting at night, bringing flowers. I think she wants to make peace before it's too late." "Do you want that?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "I don't know. Forgiveness is strange, isn't it? Sometimes you want to give it, but part of you still needs to hold on to the pain, because it's the only proof that what happened mattered." He nodded, understanding more than he wanted to admit. That evening, as the hospital lights dimmed, Ethan stepped outside for air. The sky was bruised with clouds, the kind of dark that carried thunder behind it. He called his driver but hung up halfway through. He didn't want to leave yet. Instead, he walked the empty parking lot, thinking of Lila's words. Forgiveness is strange. He realized he'd never forgiven his father, not for dying, but for the impossible expectations he'd left behind. Maybe that's why he'd become so ruthless, chasing approval from a ghost. He whispered into the cold night, "What would you say to me now, old man?" The wind didn't answer, but he felt it, a quiet shift in his heart. A pull toward something better. When he returned, Lila was awake, sketching again. "You're here late," she said softly. "I was thinking," he admitted. "Dangerous habit," she teased. He laughed quietly. "Yeah. I was thinking about forgiveness. How maybe it's not about letting others off the hook. Maybe it's about setting yourself free." She smiled. "Exactly." Then she held out her sketchbook. "Want to see?" He nodded, and froze. It was a portrait of him again. But this time, it wasn't the sad man she'd drawn before. This version was lighter, softer, eyes full of quiet determination. He swallowed. "That's not who I am." She tilted her head. "Not yet. But it's who you're becoming." He couldn't look away. Days passed. Lila grew weaker, but something inside her, something fierce and bright, refused to fade. She kept painting, kept smiling, kept living each day as though it mattered. And Ethan, he found himself drawn deeper into her orbit, learning things about her that left him humbled. She'd volunteered at orphanages, given away what little she had, written letters to strangers in hospice just to make them feel less alone. And he, the man who had everything, realized he'd done none of that. That night, as he walked her to the hospital garden, she whispered, "You know, when I die, I don't want people to say I was brave." He frowned. "Why not?" "Because bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's living with it, choosing to smile even when it hurts." He stared at her, awed. "You make it sound easy." "It's not," she said with a small laugh. "But it's worth it." Then came the letter. A nurse handed it to him as he arrived one morning. "This was dropped off for Ms. Hart. She asked me to give it to you instead." Ethan opened it carefully. Inside was a single page, handwritten, delicate, familiar. "Dear Ethan, if you're reading this, then I've already told her the truth. I can't undo what I did, but please, help her understand why. She deserves peace, and so do you. M." He read it twice, heart pounding. Who was M? Her mother? Maya? Someone else? The truth, it seemed, wasn't finished revealing itself. And whatever it was about to change everything. Would you forgive someone who abandoned you, if they came back right before the end? Share your thoughts below. Forgiveness might just be the most powerful story we can tell. The letter felt heavier than paper should. Ethan turned it over in his hands again, reading the signature, M. He looked toward Lila's room through the narrow hospital window. She was asleep, the early sunlight spilling across her face, making her look more peaceful than he'd ever seen her. He couldn't shake the feeling that this note was something he wasn't meant to hold yet. But it had his name on it. Later that morning, he found Maya in the hallway, Lila's best friend, the one who'd started the fundraiser months ago. She was carrying a cup of tea and a worn-out smile. "Maya," he said softly, "did you leave this?" She frowned. "What is it?" He showed her the letter. She scanned it quickly, then shook her head. "No, I didn't. But it's her mother's handwriting." Her mother. So it was true. The woman in the coat. Maya sighed. "She's been coming around lately. I tried to tell Lila to talk to her, but she's scared. Hurt." Ethan folded the note carefully. "Do you know what she meant by, 'I've told her the truth'?" Maya hesitated. "No. But whatever it is, it's tearing Lila apart." That afternoon, Lila was quieter than usual. Her sketchbook sat untouched on the tray beside her bed. She stared out the window at the hospital garden, lost in thought. Ethan took a seat beside her. "You're not painting today?" She smiled faintly. "Not everything needs to be captured. Some things are too heavy for colors." He leaned forward. "Is it your mother?" Lila looked at him, eyes shimmering with something between anger and sorrow. "She told you." "She didn't. She left a letter." Her fingers clenched around the blanket. "Did you read it?" "I did." For a moment, silence filled the room, the kind of silence that presses on your ribs until it hurts. Finally, she whispered, "Then you know." "I don't," he said. "Not yet. But you could tell me." She took a long, shaking breath. "The accident that killed my father, it wasn't an accident." Ethan froze. "What do you mean?" Tears welled in her eyes. "He was a construction worker. One of hundreds working on a project your company owned 12 years ago, the high-rise collapse on Brookline Avenue." His heart stopped. He remembered that project. The scaffolding failure. The lawsuits. The headlines. His father had still been alive then, running Caldwell Industries while Ethan was studying abroad. The scandal had nearly destroyed them, until his father paid off the families quietly and buried the story. "Your father," Ethan started, his throat dry, "was crushed under the scaffolding," she said. "The report said it was a structural failure, but I found out later the company cut corners, used cheaper materials to save money." She met his eyes. "Your company, Ethan." The air went cold. "I didn't know," he whispered. "I swear to you I didn't." "I believe you," she said softly. "But your father did. And when the settlement came, my mother refused it. She called it blood money. She wanted justice, not pity. She fought for years, but she couldn't win. She lost everything trying. That's why she left. She thought I'd hate her for failing." Her voice broke. "And maybe I did. Maybe part of me still does." Ethan felt the weight of the world press against his chest. His father. The man he'd idolized. The man who'd told him, never show weakness. The same man who had silenced families like hers. He stood abruptly, walking to the window. His reflection looked foreign. Not a billionaire, not a savior, just a man standing in the shadow of his father's sins. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. She looked at him, tired but calm. "It's not your fault, Ethan." But he couldn't believe that. Not now. Not after seeing how much pain that empire had caused. That night, he drove to the Caldwell estate, the mansion he'd inherited but rarely visited. Dust hung in the air like ghosts of old conversations. In his father's study, he found the old filing cabinet still locked. He broke it open. Dozens of documents spilled out, contracts, inspection reports, payments. And there it was. Brookline Construction, Structural Material Change Authorization. Signed by Edward Caldwell. Ethan sank into the chair, reading line by line, the numbers, the bribes, the names. It was all there. His father had known. And worse, the letter showed that Ethan had unknowingly approved a later cost extension years later, as part of a legacy efficiency project. He hadn't realized what it was for. He pressed a hand over his mouth. It wasn't just his father. He'd kept the lie alive. When he returned to the hospital the next morning, he couldn't meet Lila's eyes. "Ethan," she said softly. "I saw the files," he whispered. "Everything. The signatures, the payments. I was part of it, even if I didn't know." Her expression softened with pity. "Ethan, no. You were a kid." "It doesn't matter," he said. "I built my life on the same foundation. On his rules. His greed." She reached for his hand. "Then break them." He looked at her, stunned. "If you want to make this right," she said, her voice growing faint, "don't carry his guilt. Change what he built." Her hand trembled in his. "Promise me." He nodded, tears welling. "I promise." That night, while she slept, Ethan made another decision. He'd go public with the files. The truth. Even if it destroyed Caldwell Industries. He didn't care about reputation anymore. He cared about redemption. But as he left the hospital, he didn't notice the figure watching him from across the street. The same hooded woman, eyes glinting with tears. Lila's mother. And she was holding her own letter. If you discovered the person you loved was tied to the worst pain of your life, could you still forgive them? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Forgiveness isn't weakness, it's the bravest choice there is. The storm hit the city at midnight. Wind clawed at glass towers, rain lashed the streets like punishment. Ethan Caldwell sat alone in his office on the 60th floor, the empire of light flickering beneath him. On his desk lay two things, a folder of incriminating documents, and his father's old watch ticking with merciless precision. He had made his choice. Tomorrow morning, the world would know the truth about Caldwell Industries, the corruption, the bribes, the corner-cutting that had cost innocent lives. It would destroy everything. He stared at the watch. How do you atone for something you didn't do, but helped sustain? Down in the hospital, Lila was fading. Her skin had the translucent look of someone halfway between here and somewhere else. Her lungs worked harder now. Each breath sounded like a question she couldn't quite answer. Maya sat by her side, humming a song from their childhood. "He'll be back soon," she whispered. "He promised." Lila smiled weakly. "He always keeps his promises." Ethan spent the night writing his statement. Each word felt like blood draining from an open wound. He wasn't sure what scared him more, losing his company or losing the last piece of his father's memory. By dawn, the rain had stopped. He printed the files, placed them in a sealed envelope, and left it on his assistant's desk with a note. Released to the press at 9 a.m. EC. Then he drove to the hospital. When he arrived, Maya met him in the hallway. Her face told him everything. "She's asking for you," she said softly. He ran. Lila lay surrounded by a quiet halo of morning light. The machines beeped slower now. Her eyes fluttered open when he took her hand. "You look terrible," she whispered. He laughed through tears. "You always know how to make an entrance." She smiled faintly. "You did it, didn't you? You told them." He hesitated. "How did you?" "I saw it in your eyes yesterday," she said. "That look people get right before they jump into cold water." He squeezed her hand. "It'll ruin me, Lila." "Then maybe it'll save you," she murmured. "Maybe it'll save someone else too." Her breathing hitched. The monitors stuttered. "Hey," he said quickly, leaning close. "Stay with me. Please." She met his gaze. "I'm so tired, Ethan. But I'm not afraid anymore." Tears blurred his vision. "Don't talk like that. You kept your promise," she whispered. "Now, keep living." The line flattened for a heartbeat, and then steadied again. He pressed his forehead to her hand, sobbing silently. "You're not leaving me, not yet." Hours passed. Doctors moved in and out. Lila drifted between sleep and waking. Ethan sat beside her, the world shrinking to the rhythm of her fragile breaths. When she finally spoke again, her voice was barely audible. "My mother came." "I know," he said. "She left me a letter." "I forgave her," Lila whispered. "I needed to, before I go." He shook his head. "Don't say goodbye." She smiled faintly. "Who said anything about goodbye? You'll find me in the things you fix." Her fingers slipped from his. The monitor wailed. They tried to revive her. Ethan stood frozen, watching doctors press against her chest, counting, calling for drugs, for hope. Maya held him back. "Let them work," she whispered. But he couldn't hear her. His entire world was collapsing again, not a building this time, but a soul. After what felt like forever, the doctor looked up and shook his head. Time stopped. Outside, the city kept moving. Cars honked. People hurried to work. Life, indifferent, went on. Ethan walked out of the hospital in the rain, numb, hollow, weightless. He wandered for blocks until he reached the river. The water was dark, restless, the same color as the sky. He took the watch from his wrist and stared at it. His father's voice still echoed, "Never show weakness." He hurled the watch into the current. It vanished with a small splash, swallowed by the rain-streaked water. For the first time, he felt something break loose inside him, grief, guilt, and love all tangled together. Back at the office, chaos had already begun. News outlets were calling. The scandal was everywhere. Caldwell Industries exposed in decade-old safety cover-up. He didn't answer the phones. Didn't open the door. He simply sat at his father's old desk and stared out at the storm-washed city. A knock sounded. Maya entered quietly. Her eyes were red but steady. "She wanted me to give you this," she said, handing him a sealed envelope. He opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a small painting, a watercolor of the two of them sitting in the hospital garden, laughing beneath a gray sky. On the back, she'd written, "For the man who finally remembered how to feel. L." He pressed the paper to his heart and broke. That night, the power went out in his building. He sat in darkness, only the glow of the city below him. Everything he'd spent his life building was unraveling. Investors were fleeing, the board was in panic, and yet, he didn't care. He felt strangely free. But freedom, he realized, was lonely. He whispered into the silence, "I'll make it right. I swear it." And somewhere beyond the glass, thunder rolled like an answer. When life takes everything from you, what keeps you standing? Revenge, love, or the promise of redemption? Tell me in the comments. Someone reading might need your strength tonight. The morning after Lila's death, the city was cruelly beautiful. The clouds had lifted, and the sun painted the skyline in gold, as if mocking the grief still heavy in Ethan Caldwell's chest. He stood on his penthouse balcony, watching the light crawl across the glass towers. 4 years, this view had been his kingdom. Now it felt like a tomb. Below, the world buzzed with his scandal. Reporters shouted his name, Headlines screamed betrayal, investors called it corporate suicide. But none of that mattered anymore. She was gone. And with her, the last piece of innocence he had left. On the kitchen counter sat her painting, the watercolor of them laughing in the garden. He hadn't moved it since Maya gave it to him. Every time he looked at it, he felt her voice whisper, "You'll find me in the things you fix." Those words kept echoing. He'd exposed the truth. He'd lost everything. But was that enough? Did it make anything better? No, not yet. He realized then that redemption wasn't just about confession, it was about continuation. It was about building something that could outlive guilt. He picked up the phone. "Maya," he said quietly when she answered, "I need your help." 2 weeks later, Ethan stood at the site of the old Brookline collapse. The ruined building had long been torn down, replaced by a fenced-off lot filled with weeds and forgotten machinery. The wind carried the scent of dust and rust, ghosts of what once was. He closed his eyes and imagined the lives lost here, the screams, the panic, the silence that followed. Among them, Lila's father. He knelt and pressed his hand to the ground. "I can't change what happened," he whispered, "but I'll make sure you're remembered." A month later, the Heart Foundation was born. A non-profit dedicated to funding construction safety standards, supporting families affected by industrial accidents, and providing medical grants for rare cancer research. He poured his entire fortune into it. The board of Caldwell Industries voted him out, of course. The empire was gone. But Ethan didn't care. For the first time, he wasn't building something for profit. He was building it for her. Maya joined as co-director, determined and fierce. Together, they began turning the once cold corridors of corporate greed into a beacon of human compassion. But guilt doesn't disappear overnight. It lingers like smoke. One evening, Ethan stayed late in the foundation office, staring at the photo wall, workers, survivors, families, children whose lives the foundation had helped already. Still, a heaviness lingered. That's when Maya entered quietly. "You can go home, you know," she said. He smiled faintly. "I don't know where that is anymore." She sighed, walking closer. "Lila wouldn't want you drowning in guilt. You've done more good in 2 months than most do in a lifetime." "I keep thinking about her last words," he said softly. "Keep living." "I'm trying. But it feels like living without purpose." Maya studied him for a moment, then reached into her bag. "She left something else for you." He frowned. "What do you mean?" "She gave it to me weeks before she died. Told me to wait until you were ready." Maya handed him a small envelope, sealed with a watercolor heart drawn in blue. Ethan's hands trembled as he opened it. Inside was a folded letter, written in Lila's delicate handwriting. "Dear Ethan, if you're reading this, then I'm probably somewhere quieter, somewhere softer. Don't be sad. You gave me more life in 3 months than I'd had in years. I want you to know something. I didn't forgive the world because I thought it deserved it. I forgave it because I didn't want to take hate with me. Promise me you won't live your life in punishment. You can't heal the world by hurting yourself. Paint again. Laugh again. Maybe even love again. That's what redemption really is, not fixing the past, but choosing to believe in the future. And when you see a sunrise that feels too beautiful to be real, that'll be me. Always, Lila." By the time he finished reading, his tears had fallen onto the paper, smudging the ink. He pressed it to his chest, whispering, "You're still saving me, even now." The next morning, he drove to the hospital one last time. He stopped in the garden where they used to sit, the bench beneath the old maple tree. The air was cool, still carrying the faint scent of lilies. He sat down, staring at the sky. "You were right," he whispered. "Forgiveness doesn't make sense until it's all that's left." Then he opened a small box he'd brought with him. Inside was her locket, the one she always wore but left behind after her final treatment. He placed it in the soil beneath the tree. "Rest here," he said softly, "and I'll keep building what you dreamed of." That night, back at his apartment, Ethan stood at the window again. But this time, he wasn't looking at the towers. He was looking beyond them, toward the horizon. For the first time, he saw not loss, but possibility. He poured himself a glass of wine, raised it toward the empty room, and whispered, To you, Lila Hart, the woman who taught a man how to be human again." Outside, the city lights blinked like stars. Somewhere in that glow, he could almost see her smile. Have you ever lost someone who left behind a lesson that still guides you? Share it in the comments. Sometimes, their light lives on through our stories. The city was alive again. Construction cranes swung high above skylines, and workers in orange vests filled the streets, laughing, shouting, building. For most people, it was just another day. For Ethan Caldwell, it was everything. A year had passed since the scandal, since Lila's last breath. Caldwell Industries had collapsed, but from its ashes, the Hart Foundation had risen, a name now spoken with reverence. They had rebuilt 3 community centers, funded dozens of safety reforms, and changed labor laws across the state. Yet Ethan still felt a ghostly emptiness in the quiet hours, the space she used to fill. That morning, Maya entered his office carrying a folder. "You're going to want to see this," she said, her eyes bright. He opened it. Inside was a proposal stamped with the city seal. Approval, Brookline Memorial Project, in partnership with the Hart Foundation. Ethan blinked. "They approved it." She grinned. "Unanimously. You did it, Ethan. It's going to happen." He exhaled shakily. The Brookline Memorial. A garden and monument dedicated to the workers who died that day, and to the legacy of change born from their loss. Lila's legacy. "Let's build it," he said. 2 months later, the site was transformed. Where twisted steel once stood, wildflowers bloomed in brilliant colors. Stone pathways curved around a shimmering fountain. At the center stood a bronze statue, not of a tycoon or politician, but of an ordinary man in a hard hat, reaching upward, holding a single blooming lily. At the base of the statue, the inscription read, "For those who built with their hands and loved with their hearts." The Hart Foundation. Ethan stood before it as the crowd gathered for the unveiling. News cameras flashed, reporters buzzed, and city officials took their places at the podium. But when it was his turn to speak, Ethan stepped forward without a script. His voice shook at first, but grew steadier as he spoke. "I was born into a world where money could hide the truth," he began. "For years, I lived blind, measuring worth in numbers, not in people. Until someone walked into my life and changed everything." He paused, looking up at the sky as sunlight broke through the clouds. "She taught me that no matter how broken something is, or someone, there's always a way to rebuild. Not with power, not with wealth, but with compassion." He swallowed hard, his voice thick with emotion. "I can't undo the past. None of us can. But we can choose what kind of future we build on its foundation." The crowd was silent. He looked toward the statue again. Her name was Lila Hart. She wasn't a billionaire or a CEO. She was a waitress, a painter, and the bravest person I've ever known. This, he gestured to the memorial, is her victory, her truth, her forever. The crowd erupted in applause. Some cried. Some clapped through tears. Maya stood off to the side, smiling through her own. She whispered, "She'd be proud of you." Ethan smiled faintly. "No," he said. "I'm proud of her." After the ceremony, Ethan stayed behind while the crowd dispersed. The sun was setting, painting the memorial in gold and rose. He knelt before the statue and placed a single white lily at its base. "You did it, Lila," he murmured. "You changed the world." Then he looked up at the bronze figure, the worker reaching toward the sky. For a fleeting second, he swore he saw a figure standing beside it. A woman in a soft blue dress, hair caught in the light, smiling at him. When he blinked, she was gone. But the warmth remained. That night, Ethan walked alone through the nearly empty foundation offices. The lights were dim, but a faint glow spilled from the conference room. He stepped inside and froze. On the table sat a single canvas, unfinished but unmistakable. It was Lila's. One of the few paintings she'd never shown him. The brushstrokes were soft, blurred, a woman's silhouette standing in the distance, facing a sunrise. Below it, a note in her handwriting. "For when you're ready to begin again." His throat tightened. "You always knew," he whispered. "You always saw where I couldn't." He took the canvas home that night and hung it on his wall, where the first light of dawn could touch it. Weeks passed, and the world began to move on. But Ethan found peace in the small things now: the laughter of construction workers rebuilding safely, the letters from families thanking the foundation, the art programs for children inspired by Lila's story. He often visited the Brookline Memorial, sitting quietly on the same bench under the tree where he'd buried her locket. One afternoon, as he sat there, a little girl approached, holding a tiny bouquet of wildflowers. "Are you Mr. Caldwell?" she asked shyly. He smiled. "Yes. And you are?" "I'm Emma. My dad says you helped build this garden. My mom says it's the prettiest place in the whole city." He chuckled softly. "Your mom sounds smart." Emma nodded and placed her flowers at the statue's base. "My teacher said this place was made for someone named Lila." "Was she your friend?" Ethan looked at the fountain glinting in the sunlight and whispered, "She was my everything." The little girl smiled. "Then she must be happy you kept your promise." He blinked. "How did you know about that?" Emma shrugged innocently. "I don't know. I just felt like she wanted me to tell you." Ethan's heart skipped. "Thank you," he said softly. "You already did." That evening, as he drove home, the horizon blazed in gold and pink, a sunset so vivid it almost looked painted. He rolled down the window and smiled. "I see you, Lila." And for the first time in years, he felt whole. Do you believe that love, true, selfless love, can change a person forever? Let me know in the comments. Maybe someone reading will find the courage to believe again. Spring returned to the city a year later, and with it came a gentler rhythm of life. The chaos that had once surrounded Ethan Caldwell's name had faded into something different: respect, even admiration. The tabloids no longer called him the fallen billionaire. Now, they called him the man who rebuilt hope. He never asked for forgiveness from the world. He'd learned that forgiveness isn't something you earn with grand gestures. It's something you grow into, one honest act at a time. Every morning, before sunrise, Ethan walked through the Brookline Memorial Garden. Dew shimmered on the wildflowers, the air smelled of new beginnings, and the fountain murmured like a quiet heartbeat. Sometimes he brought coffee for the workers tending the grounds. Sometimes he just sat alone on the bench under the old maple, the place that had become sacred to him. He'd talk to her there, not out loud, but in the space between breaths. And somehow, every time, he felt heard. The Heart Foundation had grown beyond anything he or Maya imagined. It now funded projects across the country: training programs for builders, scholarships for engineering students, counseling for families who'd lost loved ones to workplace accidents. They called it Lila's Light. At the heart of the program was a small art studio, a sunlit space filled with easels, brushes, and laughter. The walls were lined with paintings by patients and survivors who found healing in color and creation. Ethan visited every week. He never painted much himself, but he loved watching others rediscover joy the way Lila had taught him to. One afternoon, as he helped a young boy mix paints, Maya entered with her familiar half-smile. "You're really getting the hang of this human being thing," she teased. He grinned. "Took me long enough." She grew serious. "You know, the board wants to name the new hospital wing after you." He shook his head immediately. "Name it after her. Everything I am now started with her." Maya smiled softly. "Already did. The Lila Heart Cancer and Compassion Center. Opens next month." Ethan's throat tightened. She'd have liked that. She'd have loved it, Maya said. Later that week, a woman waited outside the foundation's glass doors. Her hair was silver now, her hands weathered, but Ethan recognized her instantly. Lila's mother. She stepped forward slowly. "I didn't know if you'd want to see me," she said. "Of course," Ethan said quietly. "Your family." She smiled faintly. "I came to thank you. For the memorial, the foundation, for keeping her alive in all of this." He shook his head. "I should be thanking you. You raised her to be extraordinary." Tears shimmered in her eyes. "You gave her peace. That's all a mother ever wants." They stood there for a long moment, two people connected by loss, forgiveness, and something that felt a lot like grace. Before she left, she placed a small wooden box in his hands. "She asked me to give you this, when the time was right." That evening, he opened it beneath the soft glow of his living room lamp. Inside were three things: a small seashell, worn smooth, a folded piece of paper, and a flash drive labeled Sunrise. He unfolded the note. "Ethan, the day we met, you laughed at me. You didn't know who I was, or what I carried, and I didn't know that the man who broke me would become the man who saved me. I made something for you, a goodbye that isn't really goodbye. Play it when you're ready. Love always, L." Hands trembling, he inserted the flash drive into his laptop. The screen lit up to a video. Lila sat in her hospital bed, sunlight on her face, her sketchbook open beside her. She looked straight into the camera and smiled. "Hey, you. If you're watching this, then you kept your promise. You lived. You built something beautiful." She laughed softly. "Don't cry. You were terrible at it. Just remember me when the light looks like it's about to break. That's when I'll be closest. And if you ever forget how to hope, go to the sea. Listen to it breathe. It sounds just like us." The video faded to black. Ethan sat in silence, the sound of the waves from the recording echoing faintly in the room. He closed his eyes and whispered, "I won't forget." Weeks later, he drove to the coast, carrying the seashell from her box. The sky was clear, the air cool and alive with salt. He walked barefoot along the sand until the ocean stretched endless before him. "Hey, Lila," he murmured. "I finally made it." He knelt, held the seashell to his ear, and smiled at the soft, hollow whisper of the tide within it. Then he tossed it gently into the surf. The waves carried it away. As he stood, the first light of dawn broke over the water, a brilliant gold horizon spilling warmth across his face. He closed his eyes and let the sunlight wash through him, feeling her there, everywhere. Back in the city, a new plaque was installed at the entrance to the foundation. "Founded on truth. Built on compassion." Dedicated to Lila Hart, whose 3 months changed a lifetime. Every visitor who passed through touched the plaque for luck. And every sunrise, the light through the lobby windows illuminated the words, "Built on compassion." Ethan often arrived early just to see it. Each morning, he felt that same quiet certainty, that somewhere, somehow, she was still painting the sky for him. If someone gave you a second chance to rebuild your life, what's the first thing you'd change, and what would you keep? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might be the sunrise someone else needs. The end.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.